department at Lagos Business School, where I teach executives on sustainability and strategy. And so you would say that all I do is really focused on sustainable development, but primarily in the creative and tourism sectors. So what we do at Red Clay is that we look at tourism development, and this is from either single site, for example, a hotel or an attraction like a park, to multi-site. So for example, if you wanted to do like a mixed-use tourism development, or even at state level, where you wanted to look at the entire master plan of a state. So that's kind of what we do.
Before you started this, Adun, tell us what exactly was it you did before this? What was your first love before you decided to go into tourism?
And that's a very good question. Travel has actually always been my first love, but before I started Red Clay Advisory about 5 years ago, I worked in London. I worked in London in advisory in the infrastructure, government and healthcare sector for KPMG London, and that was where I trained to be a chartered accountant. But it was from there that I started to really question more about, travel, because I used to spend a lot of money traveling, and I was wondering how we could, bring some of that into Nigeria and look at how we could diversify our economy. So I would say travel has really been my first love, but I kind of did a segue into advisory work first.
All right. Can you tell us more about Red City Advisory? Who owns it? How it's run? What's the structure like? How many countries will it exist? And more, if you can.
Okay, so it's Red Clay Advisory.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Red Clay Advisory, I started Red Clay Advisory 5 years ago, and I'm a senior advisor there. Basically, what it means is we're a small boutique practice. So at the moment, our staff strength is 4 core team members, and then we pull in consultants and advisors depending on the client's brief for what they want to do. So for example, there's a project we're working on that wanted to look at developing a museum. So we can advise them on what it should be like, whether a museum is what fits with the destination. But of course, we have to then work with historians, we have to work with curators to say, how will the museum really look? So we have a network of different advisors that we work with. And in terms of countries, we've worked in West Africa, so different states in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Benin Republic, and also in Cote d'Ivoire. But that was about 4 years ago, yes. So we keep trying to grow our network. We keep trying to grow our client base. I would say COVID really hampered us, but now with people are looking now on domestic tourism and regional tourism. And so I would say that there's now a sense of demand and interest in developing domestic tourism in West Africa.
So you talked about traveling being your first love. When you look at Nigeria and what you do, would you say there's so much great potential that we're not using, or we're trying our best to get there?
Sorry, I missed you there.
That with Nigeria, when it comes to tourism,
yes,
would you say we have so much potential we're not taking advantage of, or we're making some attempt to actually do stuff?
Right, okay, so our tagline at Red Clay is basically harnessing the potential of sustainable tourism. And it's because we've seen that there is a potential. Like if you look at any of the travel and tourism competitiveness reports, created for Nigeria, for West Africa, we have the natural resources, we have the cultural resources, we have all of that. But there's been a concerted lack of focus in terms of what we want to do and what we can do. I'm afraid I have to say that sometimes we've also always waited for the government to take the lead. And not that that is bad, but it's important that we also see how we can be the agents of change, but also how we can bring how we can increase the advocacy that we need for tourism development so that the government can also see it as important. So I would say that there's a lot of potential and that this is being harnessed, and COVID-19 has presented, dare I say, some opportunities for that now.
Yeah, so there's a huge challenge of insecurity along the West African coast. How do you navigate that?
I would say that there's a huge challenge of insecurity globally, right? And so in terms of, let's also look at how we understand insecurity and perception management. So of course, you're right, there is insecurity currently right now in different parts of West Africa, but also in different parts of the world. And what I think it's important is that we need to start to identify, at least within more secure cities, more secure towns within the West Africa region, We need to identify those and say, how do we develop tourism, but also understanding why is there insecurity, right? There's a reason for insecurity, which is in terms of livelihoods. I would say that people are a bit jaded, and in terms of just looking for how they can sustain, how they can live. And so how do we also look at how to create some sort of livelihoods for the people that are causing insecurity? And how do we start to say, can we start to develop rural tourism? Can we start to develop our rural economies so that we also stem a lot of the rural to urban migration? So I would say that, and I'm trying to say this in the best way possible. I would say that let's also not only look at the challenges, but let's see how we can work to mitigate the challenges. So an example is a destination that we worked on that had a lot of insecurity issues within Western Nigeria. And basically, they had to set up a security trust fund to say, how do we look at the security issue and how do we solve it? What's causing it? What do we need to do? How do we basically dimension this in a way that makes it safer? And how do we then communicate this safety and the work that we're doing? I always say that when you look at crime rates in South Africa, for example, in Johannesburg, they have high crime rates, but they've been able to still attract tourists, right? But when you go to Joburg or you go to Cape Town, you're told, don't do this, do this, etc. So it's also realizing the challenges, but saying we need to, address them.
Yeah.
So you talked about the fact that a lot of times things are left to the governments to discover. The private sector isn't getting on board. How would you advise the private sector to get on board, and what are the processes to go about this?
Yes, I mean, why I said so is because when you look at government, particularly the government in Nigeria, that's, is meant to be a federation, so a federalist system of government, you see that a lot of the time we're focused on the center, right? We're focused on the centralized, saying, oh, what is the center saying? How does the center operate, right? But I think we need to also understand the power we have as private sector agents and say, how do we come together and how do we aggregate our own issues, our own points? How do we advocate for this? How do we engage with public sector? How do we go to them with solutions? Many times we go to them with the problems, right? But it's like, what about the solutions? How do we create this? So what I would say we should do, and I would refer to the World Travel and Tourism Council that I worked with as well, is that this was formed by 100 of the top CEOs of the travel and tourism industry around the world, because they could identify that they had similar issues, similar problems, and they could also identify that you need to come together as a force to make your case so that the different governments can see that they can, address these challenges with solutions. And, the reason for the success of the WTTC is because we used to work in evidence-based. So we used to provide data to support whatever it is we wanted the government to then do. I would say that we need to start collaborating more within the tourism industry in Nigeria. And we also need to start looking for the solutions and bringing this to the government. So that's part of why we started the West Africa Tourism Roundtable, because like you said, we have similar challenges. We also have similar resources across the region. And then it's important to say, how can we best learn from each other? How do we come up with a knowledge sharing platform? But also, how do we present our case? And so one of the results from the first edition in March was that there was a need for a public sector engagement committee. And we've had different agents from the creative sectors in Nigeria, at least, sign up for that. And the idea is that we will be able to showcase what we're doing. We'll be able to showcase the methodology for this so that our colleagues in other West African states can also learn. And in the same way, we're also learning from them. So I would say that that's, a step in the right direction.
All right. The average traveler wants to go on vacation, pack their bags to the far corners of the world. How do you wrestle with this mindset? How do you bring the mind back to home, home here in West Africa? How do you wrestle with that?
I would say that, the average traveler, or the average person, really, first of all, creating the sense of adventure and wonder. So the average person needs to understand that there's a world out there and that there's a world to be discovered. Yep. It's also important that before you go to the world to be discovered, you understand a bit about your own world, right? When you look at places like India, even the UK, you see that domestic tourism is about 5 times more than in terms of international tourism. So there's also been work by the tourism development agencies there to say, how do we stimulate domestic tourism? How do we create a sense of wonder in our culture, in who we are, in our identity? And so what I would say is that the average traveler should definitely see the world, but it's important to even understand where you're coming from first, so that you can use that to then, compare and gauge to see how similar you are with the rest of the world, but also how different. I think that right now our focus, and this is also partly the work that we need to do in the creative sectors with the film industry, the music industry, is we need to start to showcase more about our culture, more about our way of life. We need to see that we have a beautiful heritage and that we also have beautiful sites that need to be explored. So it's almost kind of like we need people to like to travel within Nigeria, but we also need to inform them about what's available in Nigeria.
All right. So starting out your travel outfit again, your tourism outfit. Tell us, how did you get funding, and how do you still grapple with funding?
That's a very good question. Financing is very important in terms of a sustainable business and a viable business. So in terms of what we've been able to do, I have to say we've been very lucky to be able to support our activities by our clients. And what I tell people actually at the last round table we had last week is that we need more agents, more professionals in our sector. And it's important that we see that we're able to create more value when people realize that the tourism industry is quite expansive. Many times you speak to people and they think it's simply just ticketing and tour operators and travel agents, who are very important components of the tourism industry. But we also need to see that there's a lot to do in terms of how destinations are developed, how destinations are managed, and also how, like I mentioned earlier, data is collected to inform policy making. So I would say we've been able to work across these various fields, and that has been how we make money.
All right, so what are some of the most beautiful places to visit in West Africa?
Well, I have to start with Nigeria, right? Of course. I would say for me, one of the most beautiful places to visit that I have seen that needs a lot of development, right? That needs a lot of development is Nasarawa State. I would also say that I like going to Osogbo a lot. Osogbo because it has the groves, the Osun groves, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I would say that also needs to be really developed. And if you look at the history between, Osun, Ibadan, etc., you can see that there's a lot of history in the intellectual community that we need to look at. And then I would also say that we need to look at Enugu. Enugu is beautiful. Enugu has, a lot of monuments that are still, now there has been some sort of reawakening and some interest, but it still needs to also be developed. And I can't stop but say, I can't end without also talking about Cross River State. Cross River State is really one of the most beautiful places I have been in Nigeria. And then when you look outside of Nigeria, I would say Grand Bassam in Cote d'Ivoire is really nice. And also Ghana Akosombo by the Volta region is one of my favorite places in Ghana.
And bringing it back home,
yes?
What are you doing towards, because a lot of beautiful places like that, you have resorts built around them. What are the plans being put in place? Because we talked about the potential. What are the plans being put in place to ensure that you have resorts where people can just, you wake up in the morning and it's just a walk or a stroll away from where you are?
In fact, that's one of the questions I was hoping you would ask me, and I'm so grateful you've asked that question, because when we think about tourism development as well, at state level, I have to say sometimes we have only focused on one part of the equation, right? One part of the tourism system, which is, okay, we have this attraction, we'll just leave it there and we'll build a hotel and people will come, right? So I'm very pleased now that in some of the work we're doing with the states, there's this sense of a holistic approach to tourism development. So it's that sense of, yes, you have the hotel or you have the resort, like you said, but even the resort, right? You understand that first of all, to get access to any destination is going to take you some time. I have to be honest with you. So if you've traveled about 5-6 hours, either domestically or, either by plane or by road, you want to make sure that when you get to your accommodation, you have no issues whatsoever. You have a sense of arrival, you have good quality beddings, etc. It's important that, destinations understand the entire value chain of what happens, right? And sees how the guest experience can be hampered by just one little thing not being sorted in the equation. And then it's also then important to say, what can people do? And you must provide not simply, and I would say this, I went to Idonre, right? And I would say that Idonre is beautiful, it's a beautiful site. But after we had hiked the hills, it was the sense of what else could we do? So we need to also realize that we need to have aggregation of different attractions so that if people have traveled for 5 to 6 hours, you have things to do for at least 2 days. So for a weekend, you have multiple things to do for a weekend. You have a calendar of programs, of events, and then you also have well-trained tour guides that can give you the perspective of the history of the place, that can really tell you the story. It's about storytelling, really. It's about a sense of escapism. It's about a sense of education. So it's important that we have that. But I would say that the most important thing is information. How are we presenting this information? Who can access it? When you Google, when you search for tourist sites online, what are we finding? How do we make sure that people are attracted to where we're developing? And then finally, we have to talk about the food. We also need to celebrate our food a bit more. So again, it's that sense of it's that sense of going through the entire tourism system and making sure that you have thought all of them through, because particularly in more established destinations, we think it doesn't just happen by happen chance.
Yeah.
People have to be deliberate and intentional about what services they're providing to enhance the guest experience and to encourage return visitors.
Yeah. Let's talk about affordability now. How affordable are your average trips?
How affordable are the trips?
Yes, the average one.
Right. Okay. So, I know that my colleagues in tour operating, and also in terms of creating the travel guides and tour guides have really been working on this sense of affordability. So I know that they offer services that can be for groups of people, right? You have a lot of organizations offering tours for groups of people, which means that the cost per traveler is reduced. And then you also have people that are then providing more bespoke, more one-on-one individual tours for people to navigate. I would say if you want to travel by yourself, you can. Across Nigeria, apart from the airline costs, which vary, I would say you could go for about 100 to 200,000 naira. If you're going individually, you could have a decent weekend in Nigeria for 100 to 200,000 naira. But like I said, if you went in a group with existing tours, then of course those costs come down.
Okay, so tell us now, what has it been like with selling your business and getting your returns, for sustainability? What are the challenges you faced as well?
Yes, back to the finance question, and I get that question quite a lot, and I guess it's the sense of our business model in terms of sustainability, like I mentioned earlier, is basically providing advisory services to clients. So we get our revenue from clients, right? And we are able to cost it in such a way that depending on what the client needs, we don't always just offer a standard service. So sometimes there's a client we're working on now that wanted us to do an entire feasibility study and an entire master plan. And I said, well, how do you know that's what you need? Let's maybe just speak to you a bit more. Let's have a strategic review first. Then we can come to you with the right recommendations that you need to go forward. And I think our clients respect us for that. So I think there's that sense of, we're not just going to charge you just because you've come to us. It's to make sure that there's an alignment and a fit. And then we do get work from our clients. We also then offer certain, like I mentioned earlier, certain services to the industry to see how we can grow and develop the industry. Now, in terms of my sustainability model and where I see myself going in the next 5 to 10 years, the idea is that we're going to really do more to build capacity. There's a dearth of tourism professionals in our industry that really understand the tourism industry, as well as even professionals in different sectors that we need. So for example, I was on a panel with the section on business law for the Nigerian Bar Association, talking about tourism law, right? And how lawyers need to also see their role as catalysts for the tourism value chain. I think it's important that we see that we need stronger tourism lawyers that can understand if we want to move into a more sophisticated tourism industry where you have a hotel, for example, and you want to dispose of the hotel. What's the market for that? How do we start to have portfolios of tourism products that people can invest in? And so there's that. There's also tourism financing. You know, we need more people to understand tourism financing and tourism development, because we understand that the investment for tourism development has to be long-term. And so how do we also marry the capital with the development that needs to take place? And then I think finally, we also need people that can really start to, you know, see the tourism industry and provide excellent policy advisory and data analysis. So in 5 to 10 years, I would say that Red Clear would be involved more strongly in that development, and seeing how we can build a strong pool of expert tourism advisors across West Africa. And we've already started, you know. I started just this year because of COVID and what had happened last year, and some of our findings from, you know, working with the ministry in Lagos to say, how do we start to professionalize the sector? Many of the MSMEs don't even understand, you know, that they can, I mean, they're doing a lot, but that they can do much more. So I started the strategy sessions to go through their strategy with them one-on-one, and to say, okay, how do we also look towards the short to medium term? How are you ensuring that you're playing to your strengths? And so I would say that all of these various components are what I see us doing that will bring us even more value than we already are gaining now.
All right, are we taking a break?
Yes, so let's take a short break now. We'll be back in a few moments. A few words from our sponsors. You're doing well, you're doing well.
You never hear of Unified mobile app? Unified? Yes, Unified na online mobile app where Unity Bank can be called so that we go reach bank better. Whether the airtime, school fees, or any kind of ticket to rubber. Oh yeah, we go to it never finish you. You know say if you put salary for Unity Bank, you will take collect on phone loan to do it. That one now Unity pay loan. I can call Unity Bank tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Just type that 7799#. Open the Unify account. You don't need money. Even you need your own account. You don't need paper. Succeeding together.
Welcome back. It's still Business Half Hour here on Classic FM 97.3 station. It plays every song you know. Business Half Hour is brought to you by Unity Bank. We have our guest this morning, Dr. Adun Okupe. She is a senior advisor with Red Clay Advisory. Once again, good morning, Adun.
Hello.
Good morning.
Okay, so now let's talk about your staff strength. What is it like? And how do you recruit? What does it take to recruit?
Yes, so like I mentioned earlier, our staff strength, we have a core team of 4 people. Last year we had about 6 people, but because of, we tried to change our business model a little bit because of COVID-19. And so we looked at the importance of having a core team, and then we have a network of advisors and specialists that we call in whenever we need to. And this helps us to deliver value to our clients in terms of affordability. Now, recruitment, and this is why I said we've seen that there's a need for, you know, tourism capacity building in the advisory space. Currently, we recruit working with, we have a specialist HR person that we work with, and she's experienced in the hospitality and tourism sector. So that's one way. I also get people approaching me from my LinkedIn to say they want to work with me. And so what we offer is we give them short-term internships to see whether there's fit, to see whether they can work on projects. And then we use a traditional model where, you know, it's by word of mouth. So we really work in a very focused way, in a very agile manner. And what we make sure whenever we recruit is that we have an induction process. And I would say that's something that I learned in KPMG, just working there and learning about structure, I would say has really, really been the biggest addition to how I run this business, and also ensuring that we're efficient, we're effective. You know, we have systems and structures and processes from how we run internally, but also how we then, you know, offer, you know, deliver our services to our clients.
Right. It is a competitive field. What sets you apart from the competition?
I mean, when you say competitive field, I would ask how competitive it is. I would say we need more players providing specialist tourism advisory in West Africa. We don't have enough players providing specialist tourism advisory. So yes, we do have management consultants, we have consultants that are advising the sector, but we need more people that have that, operator knowledge, that have that, advisory knowledge, that strategic knowledge to work in the industry. So I would actually welcome more competition so that we don't have to, do too much.
So you do too much at the moment.
So you've just answered the question in a very, very smart way. So you're a standalone, you're giants in the field.
All right.
No, we're not giants in the field at all. But I would say for what we're offering, I would say that we're quite unique in that regard. And even about when I was doing my PhD 10 years ago, people were asking, why tourism? Why tourism development? And it's that sense of, you can almost try to see where is the world going and how are things moving. So 10 years ago, maybe I wasn't this confident. I knew that I wanted to work in tourism, but I wasn't as confident. But now that we're working in the industry, honestly, I would say that we need more people that can provide, for example, the data that I mentioned. You need a proper data collection house that can collect data on, when you ask the tour guides, for example, even in Badagry, I was talking to someone last week, how many visitors come here daily? Who is collecting that data, right? That's an idea for another person to start a business in that, because again, we can't do everything, you see, because if you try to do everything, you lose your focus and you also lose, you lose that ability to provide the expert advice you want to provide to your clients. So that's one part I would say we strongly need. We also need people that can provide policy guidance to the government. And finally, we need people that can work with our media, with our film and media and TV industries to say, how do we start to create brand Nigeria? These things, again, when you look at America, for example, they have brand USA. It's not just by magic that you see features of different destinations, etc. And they try to provide a realistic perspective, but they also show, very good, aspects of their culture and very good aspects of their traditions that has contributed to globalization around the world. So let's also learn from that and say, how do we really start to even sell Nigeria to Nigerians? So I would also say there needs to be that interface, and that's another opportunity for someone else to come into. All right, just as an example.
Your challenges so far, what has it been like, especially during COVID-19 times and in general?
Running a business in Nigeria has a lot of challenges, but I say that it also has a lot of rewards. And before I come to the challenges, I would say that I get to do what I love to do. I wake up every morning, honestly, feeling very fortunate that I am doing what I want to do. And I'm thankful for the ability to make that path as I want to. Now, that path can be very lonely. That's a challenge. It can be very lonely. And it can also be very, because sometimes you can't really see a blueprint and say, oh, I want to copy, not copy, but I want to look like this, or I want to see what they've done and copy it for this. It's basically saying in this industry, we're really trying to work with a very, very young industry. The other challenge would be the people factor. I have been able to work with an excellent team now, but it has taken a lot of, trial and error to get to where we are now. I would say that now we've cracked it. We have a very strong team. We have people that are also tourism and hospitality specialists, and that has really made the difference in the understanding of the services. And I would say that the final challenge has been, working with our colleagues to make us see more that we have that power to really change the industry. And we need to really harness more of that power and see how can we start to influence government? How can we start to advise government as opposed to just waiting? So I would say that those three are the key, not challenges as such, but the key lessons that I have learned. And where I want us to go is that if more of us collaborate, if more of us see that our issues are not unique to just us, and if more of us see the power that we have to provide solutions to governments, at the state level, at the local government level, at the national level, we can really create the industry that we want to create.
Yeah, talking about governments now, what would you like the government to stop? What would you like them to start? And what would you like them to continue?
I think in a nutshell, it's basically that we need to place a stronger focus on tourism. and understanding of tourism, right? I would say that, several boards and ministries really need to understand the tourism industry. And it's that sense of capacity building as well internally to see that tourism, so for example, we're talking now in Lagos about smart cities, resilient cities, etc. And I think those are beautiful conversations to be had. But then what about the leisure economy? What do people do in their non-work time? When we think about development, we are focused primarily on economic development, which is important. But then the socio-cultural is the environment within which that development can happen. The environmental also affects that development. And I would say that the leisure economy, which is one of the aspects that tourism covers, is a very important part of that. And just very quickly, because I'm an economist, I like to explain this equation. We have 24 hours in a day. It's a very short equation, I promise. We have 24 hours in a day, you're supposed to work for 8 hours, you're supposed to sleep for 8 hours, and you're supposed to have leisure time for 8 hours where you have engaged in recreational activities, etc. And this is where the tourism industry fits. So I would say that we need to start to understand that equation more so that we can see that it's about enhancing the quality of life. And then to also then see that once you do that, you create a stronger sense of community. And there are other, sustainable development factors or benefits that can then be had from tourism development. I don't think we are understanding that equation yet. And I would say that perhaps that's something that if government can do, a lot of the work that we want to do as private sector will be much easier.
All right, so what's that personal mantra you have that keeps you going?
Okay, so I oscillate. I have three. If it's okay, I oscillate between the three on my page, on my WhatsApp status, on my phone, etc. So the three, the first one is done is better than perfect, and it was my PhD supervisor, Professor John Tribe at the University of Surrey, that used to say that to me, because I like to be. I have this need not perfectionist, but I have this need for continuous improvement and perfection. And sometimes it's better to just be done. Yeah. And then the second one would be that everything good will come. This is from the book by Sophia Ta. And it's really sometimes when I feel discouraged or sad or wonder if I'm really going to make a difference, I'm reminded that everything good will come. And then I think the final one is the quote by Machado, which is wanderer, there is no road, the road is made by walking. And so again, it's that sense of you need to create your own path, especially in the space that we're playing. We need to set the standards, and it's good to remember that we make the road by walking, and so we must continue to walk.
All right, thank you so much for coming on, Adun. It was nice having you.
Thank you, Ifeanyi. Thank you.